All right. We are live. Welcome everyone to the first edition of TRB Live. I want to thank the team at Morning Brew. They have been gracious enough to let us use this lovely studio today, and really thankful. And I think it's actually fitting for a couple of reasons. One is, Morning Brew, I was like walking through these offices and it's like, this bustling activity. There's like a merch shop, like some kind of boutique, like in the lobby. And it was all built by email. And we're going to be talking a lot about email today. And I can remember when Austin Reef came into our Digiday studio, which was also a wellness room, and he was trying to convince me that he was building this media company on email, and I was like incredibly skeptical. And here we
Look at
are.
us now.
And here we are. And Tyler Denk, with Beehive, he's the co-founder and CEO of Beehive, who was employee 2
Yeah.
at Morning Brew. This is a
Yep.
little bit of a homecoming. You did not have this office back
We
then.
did not have this office. We were at 85 Broad Street down in a WeWork for the first few years back when they actually served beer at WeWork. So the fun
Yeah.
days. Moved to a new office, and then I left before I ever had an in-office studio.
Yeah, and I can remember I met Tyler during the pandemic and in Miami, I think it was,
Yep.
and
Where there was no pandemic.
there was no pandemic. So we went out to dinner with a bunch of Morning Brew people, and you were talking about email, and it was funny because I wasn't sure what you were asking, a lot of probing questions about email news, my use of like email newsletters and whatnot. And it turned out you were building something new. So we were going to get into like why email is so important. We've got Matt Gross here from the parent company of TechCrunch, Regency. We'll get into the Regency strategy when it comes to having these different publications, including TechCrunch. But just to set the stage, what is it you wanted to build with Beehive, all the tools that you ended up building for Morning Brew as employee 2? Yeah.
Yeah, so a bit of context. When I joined Morning Brew, we were on some WordPress website. We were using MailChimp. Neil, who you met, or well, you met him before, but he was just in
Yeah.
here. Every night at like 7 or 8 o'clock, we would copy and paste content from Google Doc to WordPress to MailChimp. And we would copy and paste till 10, 11 p.m. We would accidentally delete something. The email would get messed up. We'd have to start over. We'd go till 1 or 2 a.m. That happened probably once or twice a week. And so from that experience, I was like, how do we build an actual like CMS that's built for email specifically? And a lot of the CMS off the shelf, whether it's like a WordPress or Piano, all built for like this WordPress ecosystem that most publishers were publishing to the web. And we kind of viewed ourselves as we're an email first newsletter company. We saw the Skim and Axios and saw ourselves as different. And me being a 23-year-old young self-taught developer, super naive, thought, I don't want to use an off-the-shelf software that's kind of built for web, but for email. So what if we just built our own CMS for email specifically? So that was kind of the first thing that I built at Morning Brew. Went on to build an ad management platform. We built the referral program. We kind of built our own bespoke custom ecosystem of tech. And so Morning Brew, the content, which is like probably why we were super successful, but somewhere second or third reason why we were successful was this totally bespoke ecosystem that allowed us to grow very quickly, understand our audience, and publish the email and web simultaneously.
Right. And now you're helping publishers do that. And I think what's really interesting to me is we had a breakfast earlier today with a bunch of great publishers, is how critical email is now to these businesses. It's not like there's just email businesses, but I think every publishing business has to get closer to the audience, has to have a direct connection with the audience and build from there. And a lot of them were not architected that way. And that's where I want to bring in you, Matt, like a little, it's funny because I remember, this is what happens as you get older. I remember a lot of publishers who were, the kind of disruptors of their time that are now almost legacy. Let's be real, because they were built for a completely different era and a completely different incentive structure. And now you need to reorient these businesses. So give us a background on Regency and the properties under Regency alongside Tech.
Sure. So we should say it's Regent.
Regent,
Regent
sorry.
LP is a private equity company at the top of this whole pyramid. And we own a lot of different things, fashion brands, automotive manufacturing, but there's a whole group of media brands as well. So TechCrunch, we acquired at the beginning of May, along with The Foundry, which is Macworld and PC World, and some B2C brands like CIO. And those joined our other media companies like Sunset Magazine, Sightline Media Group, which is a bunch of military and defense publications, Military Times, Army Times, Navy Times, Defense News. We own Cheddar. We own RateMyProfessors.com. Yeah, so it's the whole sort of media constellation. And I'm the VP for digital initiatives across a lot of that, which is kind of everything except for coding.
Yeah.
And a lot of email. Like I focus a ton on email. And so when we acquire these new brands, one of the first things I do is just kind of figure out what they're doing with newsletters and what they should be doing.
Yeah. So let's get in there. I want to encourage everyone to use the Q&A function. I want to I've got a laptop in front of me, and so I'm going to work in some of those questions. But let's talk about like the email strategy at TechCrunch, right? Like when you got in, what was the state of it, and what are you trying to accomplish within the overall strategy of modernizing TechCrunch?
Sure. So when I found out we were getting TechCrunch, I looked at all of their email products, and they were doing a decent amount of email. They didn't have a really aggressive acquisition strategy for getting new addresses, and their emails were generally they were using essentially Be Free, which is a sort of visual template builder connected to HubSpot to send almost all of their emails. And they were using MailerLite to a degree for one of their email products. But these were sort of, the team spent a lot of time building these emails every day and sending them out and not necessarily getting a lot back in return. So when we came in, one of the first things I always do is just try to understand what are we even trying to accomplish with email in the first place? Like, what is the point of sending any email at all? Are we trying to get traffic back to the website? Or are we trying to send an email full of marketing messages that are going to hype our events? Or are we trying to get people to sit in, a bathtub with a glass of red wine and enjoy reading a nice, beautifully written email just all on its own in the privacy of their own inbox? So, we looked at what they were doing with the emails that existed and tried to sort of sort them into those different buckets. So there were 2 emails that were very much, inbox reads, and there was about a half dozen other emails that were, really just existed to get people back to the website. TechCrunch publishes a lot of stories every day, and we just want to make sure that people who really care about that stuff actually read those stories every day. There's a lot of them. So from there, it's like, okay, what are the platforms that we're using on the other brands that are going to make sense? Or are there new platforms that we need to bring on? And, for the most part, our other brands we're already using a mix of Sailthrough for traffic driving emails and Beehive for those inbox reads. So it was a fairly simple process of saying, okay, well, let's move these ones over to Sailthrough, move these ones over to Beehive. There's a lot of infrastructural stuff that you have to adapt to that. How are you getting new email addresses? How do you send people? When someone's on TechCrunch.com and a little thing pops up that says, please subscribe to our email. How do you get that email into the right place? How do you get them subscribed to the right email? So there's a little, automation and infrastructure work to do there. But, it's a relatively straightforward process after that because Sailthrough and Beehive are fairly decent products.
Fairly decent.
Congrats.
Fairly
You heard
decent.
it here
Congrats.
first.
But that-
Reasonably
Yeah.
good.
That's going to go on our landing page later
Yeah.
today. That's right.
But talk to me strategically, what is the job that email is doing for, let's just zero in on TechCrunch? Like, what's the job? Because like a lot of publishers were treating email as a way to drive traffic back to the website. And it has that job still, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it has a larger strategic role.
Yeah, well, it's going to keep people involved. I mean, the people who read TechCrunch, TechCrunch is this, it's sort of a niche publisher in a way. I mean, it's decently big, but it's covering like the startup world, the tech world, this, world of funding, and
It's a trade publisher.
Yeah, it's a kind of a trade publisher, but with appeal to a broad audience. But the people who are really interested in this stuff, you want to rope them in. You want them to stay involved and not just sort of, casually come across you on Google News, right? Like, I mean, that's a decent part of our traffic too, but we want them to stay. We want them to come to TechCrunch Disrupt, our big annual conference, which is taking place next week. And I think you can still get tickets if you're listening to this and you really want to go to San
A fairly
Francisco.
decent conference, I've
Yeah,
heard.
use
Fairly.
code TRB.
I'm gonna stop using the word indecent. We're
It
gonna
was
get
the
indecent.
fairly, I think, that was triggering it, Tyler.
I like to manage expectations, right?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna hype things too much. But you know, these are our audience, our subscribers, our customers, if you want to take that route, and email gets to them and it helps us identify what they're most interested in. They're our most devoted readers, really. The people who are going to hand over their email address are entrusting you with their email address, right? Like, we don't want to spam them with too many messages. We don't want to send them stories that they don't care about. So we care about them, and hopefully they care about us in return.
Yeah. Tyler, when you talk with particularly larger publishers, right? I mean, because like I think a lot of times people think of Beehive as, you know, people like me, you know, that are I hate the word creator, right? But like that are not like large publishing organizations and who don't have the infrastructure that a lot of these organizations have, which in some ways is actually an advantage these days because you don't have a lot of that legacy infrastructure to deal with. What are the challenges that they end up facing when it comes to modernizing their like infrastructure?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of some of the stuff that you were just talking about, where their primary purpose of email has been for such a long time to drive traffic back to the website
Yeah.
and trying to fit this paradigm of editorial-based newsletters where the newsletter, in theory, could be the product. You might not click out back to the website. You might be monetizing the newsletter itself. It might be top of funnel towards something else. So I think it's more of a strategy thing for the first thing once we get over that hump. The other thing is Beehive has an all-in-one solution for email and website and ads, and a lot of these legacy publishers are deep into the WordPress ecosystem, or they have different workflows and have trained their team accordingly. And so we've come a long way in where I think we initially started off kind of for this solopreneur creator who just wanted to publish and have a newsletter, or like the very scrappy, like kind of like Morning Brew for X. So Morning Brew for crypto, Morning Brew for AI. That was a lot of like our early cohorts of users. As we've gone up market to Time, The Ringer, Texas Tribune, Newsweek, different sets of problems. But I think what they're used to is kind of this paradigm of fairly antiquated software that hasn't been updated in a while and doesn't move at which the pace that we move, which is very fast Silicon Valley startup who listens to customers. We will have a sales call and they will explain, I need XYZ feature because our team's taking forever to do this. And we can have that done end of week. And so I think that's kind of really been our competitive advantage. And then like how we've evolved is we never launch with like an RSS ingestion or like a send API where you can actually use your own CMS, but just like send emails via an API. And as we've gotten more involved with these larger, more established publishers, kind of understanding it's not like our way or the highway, but we actually need to understand where their workflows are and build around those, has been something that we've been doing a lot of these past years.
Yeah. Matt, how do you end up thinking about email as a standalone product versus the traffic driving? Because like you're trying to operate them both, right? And it feels like more of the weight has moved towards treating the email as a product unto itself. You know, I mean, there's a lot of people publishing on Beehive, on other email platforms sometimes.
Rarely.
Rarely, but sometimes, weirdly. And those are like, they're treating it like the product itself. And those are the newsletters that have kind of, I think, gotten the most traction.
It takes a lot of buy-in, right? It's one thing to do it if you're a really small organization where maybe there's, you know, you have the flexibility to just sort of start doing that. But, you know, for us, it's finding people on the edit side who understand that and want to do that, and finding people on the ad sales side who are going to be able to sell the newsletter that way. And that is, you know, that's a cultural shift. I mean, TechCrunch has been around for a long time doing what it does. And, you know, this new ownership hopefully will show new ways of doing these things, right? We have to start doing email in a new way. I mean, this has been our process over the last 6 months of sort of acquiring TechCrunch and shifting its systems. And now hopefully we're in a position where we can start to experiment, try new things, and show people that yes, we can do email as its own thing and it can lead the way. But we have to show that now. That is the challenge, right? And it requires, not just me to say this, but other people on the team to jump in and say, oh, yeah, right, we can do this thing. I have this idea. Let's come up with an email product around it. So it takes time.
So what are walk us through, like, what are the main email products? Because one of
Sure,
the
sure.
topics that came up at breakfast today was how a lot of publishers have email sprawl in some
Mhm.
ways, and that everyone seems to want a newsletter these days.
Right.
There was talk of one publisher that, she has a queue of writers that want their own, like, newsletters, and she wants to keep them happy, and she doesn't want them to break off and go to Beehive on their own. But at the same time, another publisher talked about really focusing on what is the job this is doing. Is
Right.
this actually adding to the strategic purpose?
Yeah. So, I mean, I can talk about the traffic driving ones are sort of easy to explain. There is a daily email, which is actually twice daily, and that's links to all the stories that we've been publishing. Comes out in the morning, comes out in the afternoon, comes out on Sunday. That's just sort of basic flagship. Here's what we've been up to. Two other traffic driving ones are Startups Weekly, weekly traffic driving email about all of our startup coverage. And another one that's week in review, which is really just like, you only want to get this once a week. Here's like the important stories for the week. Those are sort of straightforward. They're easy to curate, easy to get out, easy to design, and you know, they're pretty much turnkey. It takes 5 minutes for an editor to curate them, and they're out the door.
And how much curation is being done versus programmatic interest based where it's actually personalized to the recipient?
Yeah, so the emails tend to have about 9 stories in them, and the editors basically go into sail through and they'll pin maybe 1 to 3 stories at the top to make sure that everybody's getting what an editor decides is the most important story. They'll tend to pin one at the bottom. We have one slot that's like, here's it, last but not least, here's a cool, fun story. And they'll paste something in there that has like a good visual, or is it just a fun, kicker for the email. And then sail through's big thing is personalization based on tags and click and browsing history. So we really just let the robot decide what's going to be kind of in the middle zone of that email. So going to that kind of setup is, taking their process from, half an hour or 40 minutes, maybe more, to, pop in, see what the stories are, put this one here, that one there.
Yeah.
And they're all done.
Tyler, are you agnostic about that as far as, like, whether people want to have a curation of stories that link back to, like, the website, or treat them as, an owned product? Like, I mean, you have your own newsletter, right? I consume it, like, on my phone in the email. Everyone should get it. Big Desk Energy.
Yeah, sign up, mail.bigdeskenergy. Yep.
But I think of Beehive more around that kind of email versus the more traditional email, which I think Matt is describing, even with the personalization.
And I think Matt would agree because that's how they siphon their email, right? They went to sail through for this like hyper personalized interest based email, and then they use us for more of the editorial. I would say again, as we listen to users and as we've gone up market to chat with the TechCrunches of the world and a lot of these other publishers, like that, there's still clearly a massive business in this personalization. So if anyone at Sail Through is listening, that is definitely the direction that we are going in. We are launching in a few weeks dynamic content, which is like the first step of that, which is if you live in New York, you get this type of content. If you live somewhere else, you get different type of content. If you open all of the emails, you get this special offer. If you don't open emails, you get something else. And so opening up dynamic content from the perspective of audience attributes, engagement, demographic data is what we plan to launch in a few weeks. The evolution of that is going to be the full personalization where we know that this reader always clicks on links about startups and politics, and they're a male in the Northeast. And like, how do you personalize that email different from someone who is interested in health tech or something different? Like that type of personalization at scale where we can kind of imitate what he just described is very much on the roadmap and something that we think about. So to answer your question, very agnostic. we've built the business very agnostic from a monetization standpoint. We have the Beehive ad network, we have paid subscriptions. But if Brian Morsey has a different way to monetize his audience, we aren't opinionated in you can't do that because we don't have the features or we don't support that. Our standpoint has always been how do we get publishers to have success on the platform? However, and any tools that we can provide and build to support them, we are fully supportive of that. So if the market wants to pull us towards hyper personalization, that's 100 something that I think we're best in class with product. And I think we can build an incredible product to support publishers.
Yeah. So Matt, tell me when you when you took over like TechCrunch, I'm sure there was a lot of tech debt from Yahoo.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like going with a crazy idea. I'm pretty sure there was a lot of tech debt. Right?
Sure.
What were the main challenges that you had to just like weed through? I'm sure you had a list that hadn't been cleaned in a long while. Just give me the top three.
I mean, just getting off HubSpot was a big deal. And seeing
Okay, we got shots fired at Sailthrough and at HubSpot.
no, I mean, no, it's not
We're
about
an honest
HubSpot.
podcast. We're an honest podcast.
It's that you know, there were just a lot of things that were just not configured well, right? Like things have been set up and left in a default state. So I think the HubSpot default is that if you miss 11 emails in a row, you get automatically sort of disconnected, disengaged. So our TechCrunch daily email goes out twice a day on weekdays and once on the weekend, which means if you go on vacation for a week, you miss 11 emails in a row and you get automatically unsubscribed from this email. So there wasn't really anybody who'd set this thing up to like maybe take that into account, maybe have a re-engagement campaign. There was just like not set up that way. So I didn't, that's not a HubSpot thing. I don't know if that's a Yahoo thing, but like there were just these holes where it's like no, people weren't paying attention to this thing in the right way. So maybe if it had been set up differently, if it had been really a fully functioning email ecosystem that had been running through HubSpot and BeFree and MailerLite, then we might have left it that way, but it was not. The tech debt was, so massive that it's just easier to move it off onto something where we know right away how to configure all the stuff to make it work. So that's what we did. It took 2 months to change email platforms. Could have been a little bit less if we really hurried it, but 2 months isn't too bad.
Yeah. And are you doing subscriber only newsletters?
Not yet. So I mean, that's really why we wanted to do some of these ones on Beehive, is so that we could evolve them to become, subscriber only or have paid tiers. So the two that we're doing on Beehive right now are TechCrunch Mobility, which is all about transportation, cars, planes, trains, automobiles, that kind of thing, and the sort of evolution of that. And that's very much like a written through kind of email. It's essentially an article with, other elements that make it into an actual newsletter. One of the shifts there was doing it so that it comes out in email form a day or two before it comes out on the website, right? Like that's a major thing, is if you're going to be publishing articles, real editorial content in an email, give people a reason to subscribe to the email rather than just like, lots of times you see this stuff on the website at the same time as it comes out in an email. Why am I going to subscribe to the email? What's the advantage of doing that, of cluttering my inbox when I could just go check out the website? No, we're going to give it to people before, give them a reason to really get this thing. So we've done that, and that thing is up and running, and it's going smoothly. And maybe now the thing to do will be to figure out what can we add to that. What are the most loved parts of that? How can we add in, elements that people would want to pay for? People would like absolutely want this in their email, whether they're paying for it or not. Like, how do we make that more attractive? And then the other one that we're doing on Beehive is strictly VC, written by TechCrunch's editor-in-chief, Connie Luizos and Alex Gove. And that's 5 days a week. And it's like all of the info that you would want to know about the VC world, what's getting funded, what's not getting funded, where the money's going. And I would love to see that evolve into something that, has some kind of paid tier to it or exclusive tier to it, just to say, here's a product and here's how we evolve it. I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know what that's going to look like. We're just getting to a point of stability right now. So, over the next 6-12 months, maybe we'll figure that out, or maybe it will stay the same. A popular email product full of information that people love.
Yeah, I just put up a poll about how would you describe your organization's current email setup? I guess this is the opportunity for you, Tyler,
Yeah.
as you fix your
Yeah, I'm trying
your
to.
microphone. um, Modern and integrated was only 22%. The biggest, the most common answer with 38% was functional but fragmented, and another 30% said it was outdated or manual. I guess, does that speak to that speaks to the situation that you had sort of
Yeah,
originally found? Like, where would you
I think
you
we're
were
somewhere
answering that
between, what is it, functional but fragmented, and
functional but fragmented.
modern but integrated. I mean, the challenge with running multiple email systems is, you know, deduping, right? Deduping in a sort of meta sense. People subscribe, people unsubscribe.
Well, no one likes the list getting smaller, I noticed, organizationally. Like, it's just really
Sometimes
hard to
you have
come
to do
into
it
like the
though.
meeting and be like, so here's what I did for everyone. I took and go to the sales team too with this. I took our email list and made it 40% smaller.
Well,
Well,
I deleted 5,000 bots that were subscribed to our email
But
because
to hear it,
10
I
years
feel like.
ago, some marketing companies signed up 10,000 bots and they just stayed on our email list for who knows how long. I mean, that's not TechCrunch, but it might be one of our other brands. You have to clean those lists. You have to cut people out who are not reading, who are not even people.
it's funny you bring that up. When I first joined Morning Brew, my first title was growth engineer, just because I did engineering. I don't know if that's a real title. I just did engineering in college and wanted engineer in the title. But my goal was to grow the newsletter. And up until that point, it was Alex Austin and then a writer who like stumbled into about 100,000 emails over the course of like college in a few years. And I knew nothing about email, knew nothing about newsletters, nothing about email. So I took calls with like people like you, growth leaders at like the Skim and like wherever else. And once I understood email deliverability and saw that like 20% of our list was opening, the first thing I did as growth engineer was actually cut the list in half, which as someone who joined the company like 3 weeks prior was like a very
Bold.
difficult sell,
Yeah.
especially because I'm not even like the expert in the space. I just figured out what email
Well,
deliverability
you
was
could
a few
go in
weeks
and be like,
earlier.
I'm a growth engineer.
It was at the time when the 76ers were tanking, and there was like trust the process, and so
Oh,
I
yeah.
literally have to sign off every email, trust the process, and it worked. We got up to 50% open rate and never looked back. But yeah, no one likes cutting the list.
We got a question from my favorite attendee, which is anonymous attendee. They always bring the heat, anonymous attendee. I notice it's a good archetype. Hello, asking about the acquisition at the top of the funnel. Anonymous attendee wanted to know: is the landing page most important, or are there other things you had to go through? I think anytime, like, I feel like email acquisition has gone through a lot of different phases, and like you've been like at the forefront of many, Tyler. I think some of the most effective like email acquisition tactics, I think you've like pioneered. You had like a viral
We've
you
taken
had a
some
viral post back in the day, I believe.
the referral program.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that credit goes to the Skim. I think the Skim was like the originators of this referral program with like the Skim Ambassador
There
program.
was like sweepstakes, then it went on to referrals. There's
We
always
definitely innovated the MacBook Pro giveaway, which was incredible. So I guess to give more context, the Skim had a referral program where once you reached a certain amount of referrals, you became like a Skim ambassador, and you got like your name at the bottom of the newsletter, like kind of silly stuff. But then they
yeah.
had like tote bags and T-shirts, and the Skim was like the one that we always looked up to. Like we were this upstart, 500, 700,000 subscribers. The Skim was like making milestones, 3-4 million subscribers. That's also when we started talking about like vanity metrics in the industry and like where actual unique opens is what matters, not the number of subscribers, but separate point. But anyway, the Skim was crushing it. And so we took a lot of inspiration from them. We built our own referral program, the Morning Brew referral program. We gave away, what was it? At 3, you got like an exclusive Sunday newsletter, which was actually the most sought after out of all the rewards that we gave away. We gave away T-shirts, hats, coffee mugs at different levels of referrals. The free newsletter on Sunday that we sent if you had 3 referrals had 100,000 people on it. So if you do the math, over 300,000 people had to be referred just to get onto this newsletter. That was super effective. Yeah, that works super well
But
for
what
us.
about today, right? Like, so everyone, I think the biggest problem in all of digital media is the growth engineer might come up with, the latest and greatest growth hack, and then it quickly becomes well known and it loses its efficacy. It always happens everywhere. And I think what Alex is actually is the anonymous attendee is wanting to know is like what today are the best ways to grow like an email list?
You want to take this?
Yeah, like how are you
What are
growing?
the best ways?
Yeah, how are you growing your email list? So you cleaned out a lot of like, junk
Got
in
a lot
it.
of bots, yeah.
A lot of bots are gone.
I don't think we're doing anything super sophisticated, right? We're using, uh, people come to the website, right? Like that is kind of the fundamental thing
It's
is
a
like
funnel.
we're
How
publishing
much do you
stories.
optimize like the landing pages, the pop-ups? Do you do like email gates where you can read half of the article, but you have to
We
put an
haven't done
email?
that yet. We've mostly been using Hello Bar. Do you know them? They're a modal pop-up thing that's really designed to acquire email addresses, and they've got really pretty good targeting, right? So you can target by WordPress tags, you can target by refer, you can, target by simple things like URL keywords and things
Yep.
like that. But like, if someone comes to us from, Y Combinator, right? We can have a pop-up just for them that's like, hey, Y Combinator, why don't you subscribe to our emails and
Okay.
actually get this story next time before it, you know, 2 days later it hits Y Combinator, right? Like those are the things that we can do with that. And
Yeah.
that's actually really effective, right? It's people who are already interested in your content coming to you and you target them appropriately for the things that they're reading and how they've come to your site.
But that funnel is going to get more challenging, particularly as you get less like
Oh
organic
yeah, it's
traffic
already
to
challenging. I
the
mean, that is always
.com.
the challenge of like, how do you get people off premises, right? And social isn't so great for that. I'm trying to push collaborations with ad partners, right? Like, are there things that we can do together where we all collect email addresses and share them because they can reach people that we can't? I'd love to see that go on more.
Yeah, I remember the good old days of Exit Intent. Remember Exit Intent with like
Yep.
Balance
Yep.
Exchange, and it was like negging the lay. It's like, oh, I don't want to cure cancer. I don't want to be more informed.
Hmm.
And I always thought those were, really low mark. And then like you look at the data, and it's like super effective.
Yeah,
They would like
it's
come to
definitely
me.
effective.
I remember the most effective thing at Digiday. They came and the product guy was like, "Yeah, we want to do this thing. We just want to run it by you. We're gonna have an envelope with like a yellow one on there, and people are gonna click it, thinking they have a message, and then and they're actually just gonna get a modal to enter their email address." I'm like,
That's brilliant.
"This
Yeah,
is ridiculous.
I hate those.
So effective."
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm about to build that later today. It's really smart. No, the real thing is like you have to create great content, right? Like I think what came out of Morning Brew was a lot of wannabe Morning Brews who thought that they could do the growth hacky stuff that we kind of like pioneered and like innovated without doing actually quality content.
Yeah.
And then you're just getting like trash subscribers in that are churning out way too high. For my personal newsletter, I do quite a few things. So I do like the hard email gate. So
Yeah.
what I do, I publish every Tuesday morning. Monday night, I promote what I'm going to be writing about on all of the social channels. So LinkedIn, X. I don't really use Threads or Blue Sky, but I'll post it there anyway. With like a hard like, here's what I'm writing about. Be the first to find out when I send it tomorrow. So I do that. I publish it. If you land on the website, you have to put in your email to read beyond the first paragraph. So like it's a hard email gate on any content for my newsletter. I then post in all the different social channels as well. Beehive has an internal recommendation engine, so you can recommend other newsletters in the ecosystem. They can recommend you back. You can figure out like what that looks like in terms of creating pods of other similar but not competing newsletters that are all kind of boosting each other up. We have what we call the Boost Network, which is like basically co-reg. So paid
Yeah.
recommendations where you can say, so for me, if you want to promote my newsletter, I'm paying, I think, $2 a lead. So any newsletter in the Beehive ecosystem can apply to promote my newsletter. And in exchange for every email that they send me, I send them $2, minus like the 20% that Beehive takes. So that's a revenue stream.
This is like Trump suing the government.
Yeah, we have the referral program that I talked about earlier that we built at Morning Brew is built directly into the platform. We have some distribution partners. It's kind of like what I think everyone struggles with in the newsletter space is they want the silver bullet of like Morning Brew did X and like this is where I'm going to invest all of my time and effort and growth. And the truth is, I do 15 different things for growth, and I'm not even doing enough there. I could take my content, turn it into video, post that on TikTok. There's more to be done, but I think it's just finding distribution, and it all comes from creating actually quality content.
Yeah, it's funny. I did a poll here about replatforming. Are you evaluating a new email platform in the next 12 months? And half said either actively or possibly. So I think there's clearly a appetite to like up the game in email from a lot of people out there.
Well,
And I
I
think,
think the two things that I think almost every publisher cares about, and every creator as well, is how do I grow faster and how do I make more money,
yeah.
right?
Well,
I think
this is the old like the Morning Brew
right,
simple formula,
if you
right?
can just solve those two problems
Right,
for
grow, sell.
anyone, yeah, right grow sell is what we said at Morning Brew. And then for me, from like the founder perspective of building Beehive is like, what could I wake up and build that helps our users grow faster or make more money? And so we have, like I mentioned when I was just chatting about like the different ways I've grown my newsletter, I think maybe 80% of them are homegrown Beehive features using network effects or email capture on the website or whatever else that we can help accelerate growth. And then monetization, we have paid subscriptions that at any day you could wake up and decide to make one of those
Oh
newsletters
yeah.
paid. And we don't take a cut of subscription revenue. So you
Yeah.
could take a free email list and flip it into a subscription-based product fairly easily. And then we have the Beehive Ad Network, which is home to Nike, Netflix, Roku, tons of lifestyle brands, AG1, etc. And so the thinking is if we can just stack as many chips in our favor in terms of how do we help publishers make money off the emails that they're sending. And I think that's kind of the paradigm that we're seeing and hopefully reflected in that poll is traditionally email platforms have been solely sending emails. In the Morning Brew days, we would copy and paste into MailChimp and then Campaign Monitor and then Sail Through, but it was just sending email. And now there's this paradigm of tools launching, and hopefully Beehive at the forefront of that is, can this tool actually help me with audience acquisition and growth and monetization, where it's more than just the pipes to send email, but it's actually driving growth and revenue for the business. And I think people are starting to take notice of that.
Yeah. Matt, let's talk about monetization real
Yeah.
quick. How are you making money off these emails?
Primarily direct sold advertising, right? Across all of our brands, we have ad sales teams who sell sponsorships of these newsletters, whether on Sail Through or yeah, and on Beehive. I mean, that's the gold standard for us. It's an extension of the ad sales that they do for the websites. So that is probably 95% of it. But when we started using Beehive, which is probably a couple years ago for Cheddar, um, having that ad network was a way that I helped sell this to my colleagues of like saying, hey, yes, we're doing direct sales. Like that's what we want most of all. But like direct sales are not every single day, not every single newsletter. We need to be able to monetize this thing in between those direct sales events. And so having that ad network has just made these things, you know, at least break even, which is really nice and in some cases profitable. So like having that available is huge. We haven't really, gone that deep into paid subscriptions yet, though.
Yeah.
That's
But
something I would like to see more.
talk about just a quick aside before that.
Yeah,
Like
go for
I
it.
do like with Cheddar, because I have to mention this anytime Cheddar comes up. I did play a small but pivotal role in getting Cheddar on gas pumps all over
Oh,
the
you got us on
country.
gas station TV. Thank
Yes,
you.
I joked on Twitter back when Twitter was much more useful about how John Steinberg was cutting distribution deals with like everyone from nail salons, and that it was only a matter of time before he was on gas pumps.
Yeah.
And he said that's a great idea. And Sean McCaffrey, it happened through that. So.
I send emails to the gas station TV people every single day. They're automated emails, but they get emails from me every day.
So yeah, there's that. I have that going for me. But on like the event side,
Yeah.
right? Like talk to me about how because like a lot of publishers are going hard into events, right? And there is, and this came up at the breakfast today, there is an interesting nexus between like email and event. And I think with events, like people are really sleeping on the importance of that particular data. And this also speaks to how a lot of these organizations are just still very silent.
Yeah, I mean, there's two parts of it. One is just, getting people to sign up for your events, and email just tends to be the best,
That's why in
easiest way to do
B2B,
that,
like
right?
email was
Like,
always the workhorse because you send out email, people take out credit cards and spend thousands of dollars.
yeah, I
It's
mean,
amazing.
it reaches people. You know who you're reaching generally, and people react to the stuff, right? It's very clear. It's written. It's got clear links to where to sign up. It's not something that flits by on your Facebook or Twitter feed. This is like the crossover is just super natural. Not supernatural, but super
Yeah.
natural. Um, and so yeah, we do a lot of that. I mean, all of our brands, almost all of our brands do a large number of events, and we get people to sign up by sending them emails with links to how they can sign up. I mean, it's really straightforward. And then the second part of that is building editorial emails that connect with the events themselves. So over a Sightline for all of the defense and military events that we're involved with, we send out emails that are called like the Digital Show Daily, which I guess has evolved from back in the days when you would do like a print publication every day of a particular conference.
Yeah.
So there's the digital version of it, and it's really just a simple email of like, here's all the stories that came out of this event today.
It's like a pop-up newsletter.
Yeah, it's a pop-up newsletter, and we've done that on the defense and military stuff, and with TechCrunch Disrupt, we have one launching with Disrupt starting on Sunday. So it's for event and attendees only. So hurry up and buy your tickets, please.
You get the email newsletter.
You'll get the email newsletter with, we launched this one, although it seems like it's a traffic driving newsletter, we launched this one on Beehive, partly because it's a little bit easier to spin up, but also because we know that there's going to be photos that we take on the convention floor. There's going to be social posts, and like putting that stuff into a daily email for 5 days is going to be a lot easier to do on Beehive. We can just drop those Twitter URLs in there, and it's going to appear and be really nice, and we'll be able to get that out to everybody who's going to the conference really easily.
Fairly frictionless.
Yeah,
Fairly
fairly
frictionless.
as an editor, I always say you just take out all the adverbs. So we'll just take out the fairly part. So I actually asked, I did a survey, little poll here about, what is your organization primarily to find success for email? And it was exactly split in the top two results between driving site traffic and engagement and retention. So
Yeah.
it speaks to, the fact that you have to do two different jobs. What are you seeing across your client base with, things like pop-up newsletters and using email for more than just the typical daily or weekly publishing cadence?
Yeah, it's hard to say because as you know, with email, there's so much you can do with email, and every day I kind of stumble across a customer.
But give me
doing
some
something.
new use cases that people
Throw me on the spot here. I'm well prepared for this. New use cases for email. I think like similar to driving to site, there's like this paradigm of driving to community and community-based
Yeah.
content. Whether the community is custom hosted or hosted on some third party, you kind of like earn the trust of the reader over time and identify the highest value readers and then kind of push them typically to a paid community or like a paid digital product of sorts. I think that's pretty interesting. We see like in like the digital entrepreneur space and like some of these newer age publishers really experimenting with paid communities as like that next evolution of engagement. Paid subscriptions are huge. I think that wasn't, I mean, I grew up like 5, 6 years ago, was introduced to Ben Thompson and Stratechery, who I think is kind of like the OG of like the paid newsletter space. And since I've seen a lot of niche publishers have a ton of tremendous success by offering a $10 to $20 monthly subscription. I mean, some in very niche too. There's a real estate newsletter who's doing $300,000 to $500,000 a year as a one-person shop.
Yeah.
Just because niche audience and it charges $20, $30 a month.
These are like the information entrepreneurs. Like
Yeah, I think that's like a great way of describing them.
I went to like an email growth summit that Matt McGarry
Yep.
put on. Like it's a bit of like an email guru of sorts. And it's funny because I went there. I was like a total outlier in some ways because I mean most of my experience is in the more like institutional media world, and in this world, it's totally different. Like
So, and on this like spectrum, I would say there's like pure journalism
Right.
reporting, and then there's like outcome-based like entrepreneurs or like organizations that are like the journalism is like a means to an end,
Right.
or the content's a means to an end to get them into your paid course,
Yeah.
your paid community, a paid subscription, click on ads, like whatever it is.
They're internet native businesses.
Right.
And like, and I feel like that energy is completely different. And also just like that kind of like event, it was just interesting. The kinds of things that people talk about there, I thought, you know, you should be talking more about the content. But then when I'm like, you know, with the sort of capital
When
J
you're with all
firm,
the content people, they're trying to
yeah,
figure out
yeah.
how to do the
I'm like,
video. Yeah.
you have to figure out, they had entire sessions about a landing page. You're not thinking about that stuff at all. And so it's always one of those situations where both sides sort of need to learn from the other. And I think you guys are in an interesting position because a lot of the sort of internet native business people, the information entrepreneurs, are using your product, right? And I think that there's a lot to learn from them for like more like legacy publishers or institutional.
Right. And we have the other end of the spectrum too. So Oliver Darcy, who left
Yeah.
CNN and went independent with Status, like one of our great case studies, who I think is making over $1 million a year in his first year in business, all through paid subscription. So he's very much on the end of the spectrum of like pure journalism, the daily newsletter, breaking news, etc. So we see both. But again, that's why I said it was like a difficult question to answer, because email is email, and there's so many different things you can do as in the medium, whether it is as the editorial destination, whether it's top of funnel to drive traffic back to your website, your paid community. There's a lot. And so we see something different kind of every day.
Yeah. How do you say, do you, and we talked about this just at the end of the breakfast, but I'm like intrigued by new email formats, right? Because I feel, and maybe it's just me as like content guy, like I just kind of feel like almost like the email format has gotten a little tired. Like there's a couple different types. You know, we're well into past the sort of novelty phase of like an email newsletter. The ones that seem to work the best to me, you know, are when they're written more personally, but at the same time, like I see what like the New York Times is doing with like the world and trying to introduce more multimedia types of content. And I'm just wondering, do you see anything that you would point to that is like an innovative use of like email newsletters?
It depends what you consider innovative, right? Like I think, and this is how I answered at breakfast as well, which is being very design forward in the inbox. I think a lot of traditional publishers have always viewed email, one, from the traffic driving standpoint, and then also from an email looking like any other email where it's plain text, a few links, maybe an image. And I think what hopefully our tool has democratized is the ability to add images, videos, GIFs, like really great design, interesting backgrounds, where it actually is something you look forward to opening in the inbox. And so I think there's been like an evolution, and like maybe Morning Brew played a small part. I still remember redesigning where we had like the drop shadows around the content in each of the cards. Um, but yeah, I think thinking as email newsletters as a product has forced people to think of like, if this is actually is the end product, how do we make it differentiated both in the information that we're delivering, in the way that that information is delivered, in the aesthetic that it has in the inbox, and how is it different from the other types of content that I'm consuming on a day-to-day basis? So design, I think, is like the area where we've seen the most like quote unquote innovation.
Mm-hmm.
Different formats. I agree with you. I think the emails that stand out and are the most defensible, especially with like the age of AI, would be like the Ben Thompsons of the world, like my personal newsletter, which is really just like me building in public of like the behind the scenes of building the company.
Yeah.
I think those like narrative based personalized emails perform really well and have like this affinity and brand following. Whereas regurgitating news, unless you're the one breaking the news, I think is like a little bit harder with like how the information
Yeah. The
is changing a bit.
roundups. Yeah.
Right, and we were talking about in breakfast too, where we were talking about email fatigue and how most people haven't experienced it. But the one case that the publisher gave an example is if you're just covering the daily business news and you have 6 other daily business newsletters, right? By the time you get to the fourth or fifth one, you're kind of reading the same story over and over again. And
Yeah.
unless you have someone that you respect their opinion and they're giving a different analysis of the news, then it's the news is the news, right? And so I think those are like the most likely to be disrupted.
Yeah. How do you end up like sort of dealing with, because you're like, I mean, TechCrunch is kind of on both sides in some ways. Cause like, I guess historically I thought like, I think of like the DNA of TechCrunch with Mike Arrington, extremely opinionated. It was his lens, right? And then I felt like TechCrunch moved more into being almost like a, I don't want to say a newswire, but it was like anything that was, it was aiming to be comprehensive.
Yeah, I mean, we're still fairly comprehensive.
Right. Like you could
Fairly,
publish
sorry. We're
Barely. There you
comprehensive.
go.
We're
You see, as
comprehensive.
an editor, you just gotta like take out the ly words.
Yeah, we're very comprehensive. I mean, we certainly have people writing who are very opinionated. Connie, the editor-in-chief, writes some great stuff that has a strong perspective on what tech should or shouldn't be doing. Amanda Silberling is doing great cultural stuff as well. So there's definitely that aspect of it. But in terms of the business, it's often very just scoop-driven, exclusive-driven, comprehensive. We're trying to catch everything that's going on with this enormous, huge industry in America and the world. And so that is really one of the prime animators of what we do. And that's a tricky thing. It translates into a particular kind of email product, right? Strictly VC is here's what's going on. Here's all the VC stuff that's happening. So, I don't know that we're doing yet in email what Tyler's talking about in terms of, like an Oliver Darcy kind of thing, or sort of very strong personality-led
So they don't
email.
come from a person.
Well, no, they do. I mean, the TechCrunch Mobility is written by Kirsten, and
Right.
she's.
Does it say her name?
Oh yeah,
like
it's her name
sort
on
of
it.
tactical,
Yeah,
but it is
yeah,
an
definitely. And
important
Strictly
decision.
VC is coming from Alex and Connie. They are coming from those people. But these are people who are, they're in some ways traditional journalists. They're very focused on the reporting and the writing of that reporting, and it is a different approach from someone who is.
This came up today. I mean, because it's a different type of. It has, at least to me, and maybe this like sort of wears off because it can be overdone, right? But like there needs to be a conversational like element to it. And I think one of the things that was brought up today that was a good point was that it is still kind of a one-way conversation. And I mean, one of the great things about email is you get responses, like, I mean, right or wrong, I think publishers gave up on the comment section of their websites, and now they're trying to figure out how to get back into community that they've outsourced to a lot of platforms in some ways. But the comment sections were abandoned for the most part, and email promises to be sort of two-way, but like often is still kind of one way. I mean, it's great because you do get responses.
Well, some of the little stuff that Beehive does, like the poll widget, is just like, it's such an easy way of getting people to like tell you what they think, right? There's a really basic way of making it a bit of a two-way conversation.
Yeah.
I've gotten a lot of feedback from polls too. I used to think no one would ever click on them, but I have some posts where I have 300-400 votes on a poll with like very good constructive criticism of what they didn't like about my writing or my take that I've learned from. I think the challenge that Matt was just kind of getting at, which was also discussed at breakfast, is like, I think the personality-led newsletters or content in general adds a bit more narrative and has some fandom behind it where people like look for, like, I don't even call it stratechery. I call it, I want to read Ben's opinion, right? But as a larger publisher, there's kind of this balance, especially as tools like whether it's Beehive or Substack make it easier to go independent. There's kind of like this inherent risk in building your personality.
That came up.
Because you're kind of in like the talent business, right? And like you have to retain talent. They know their worth. They see the responses and the replies of how much people love their content and their beat and their opinions. And once you build up this profile and you make them the personality of this particular newsletter or publication or column, and then they know their worth, like, is that not a risk of them eventually going independent? And I think that's what you hinted at with like Business Insider allowing them to follow. I think you need to figure out like a tactical way where you want them to lead personality driven because you know that's where the fandom's created and behavior and like where it stands out and is more defensible. But you don't want them to become so big where they can just pick up and leave. And so where does the broader organization support them to be quasi-independent but still part of the larger umbrella company? And I think that's to be determined. I've seen different companies try different things.
Yeah.
Really good health insurance.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah, that'll
100%.
help. I mean, the health insurance premiums are set to skyrocket.
Yeah. Who wants to go independent and have to pay triple premium?
I'm in the Obamacare marketplace. We can do a whole podcast on that. I got a tactical question here, Tyler, for you. Were you affected? Was Beehive affected, or were you personally affected by the AWS outage?
Yeah, but I've grown in maturity leading the company where
You don't freak
in
out.
earlier days, I used to be in fetal position in my bed while customers are texting me and calling me why their websites are down. I had meetings all day on Monday, and I was aware of it and just kind of like kept on with my day. But yeah, we were impacted.
Yeah. Okay. So Alex has another question. He said great exchange. Thank you, Alex. Um, he says recently I was really into the TLDR tech newsletter that exploits the paradigm of link you'd send to your group chat. It's quite effective criterion to choose what goes in and what's not, if you ask me. For Alex's newsletter, he's often thinking about what other paradigms and approaches to use. Value to a reader is understandable one, but it doesn't have the network effect like share to your group chat does. Any thoughts on this, Matt?
I mean, share the link you'd share to your group chat is a great concept if you don't have that many links, right? I mean,
Yeah.
TechCrunch has, 30 links a day. Are we just going to choose one or two of them to
Yeah, I
send?
think this is more a
Like,
curation newsletter type like
yeah, I
approach,
mean, I
which
think that's great. I mean, in some ways, that's what we're doing with that sort of final spot in our uh, traffic driving newsletters. Is like, here's, and by the way, here's this one thing that you should definitely check out.
yeah, I think it's
It's just
like
not coming from like a personality. It's not coming from like a person saying, "Oh yes, it's me." By the way,
yeah.
you should see
I'm
this
always
thing.
biased to like you should have a lens. Like I think what you're talking about with like Ben Thompson. Ben has a lens on a business. I mean, sometimes it's like it's a little overdone for my taste, but like, I don't need to go back to something he wrote from 2012, but maybe that's me.
Yeah.
Um, but like, I think one of the advantages, first of all, of having a lens is like you literally just point it on like an industry or whatever, and everything that goes through, it just goes through your lens. And so it's very repeatable format. Um, but like just having interesting link that you would share to a group chat, I think that's a tough place to be these days, I'll
It's,
be honest.
I mean, if you could build a whole company on that, great. But that's,
I
But
mean, curation is like I think becoming more and more important, right? Like when information now with AI and everyone has ChatGPT, it's so easy to get what happened in the news, like what does
yeah,
this mean? I think like I know taste is a thing that everyone likes to make fun of now because like
they
what's
do.
what's taste? Like
People are making fun of taste.
well because everyone shifted from
having taste.
well,
Oh,
yeah, having taste is like the new paradigm of like what people want, right? If everything's available to everyone, then people who have taste as like tastemakers are the ones who kind of like basically curation, right?
I think I wanted aura.
Yeah, either or.
Okay.
Um,
Gatekeepers.
yeah, we're all saying the same thing here.
Okay.
But what's interesting about like Matt and TechCrunch is like they have a problem that like some publishers do. A lot of the publishers on Beehive don't, which is they have like too much content, right? They're
Yeah.
publishing dozens and dozens of stories per day, which makes the whole like automated personalization of these emails more interesting potentially. But we would always go back and forth in my morning brew days about that, where in theory, Austin's very analytical, and he'd be like, well, if we know that these people like politics content more because we have all of their link data and like what they're clicking on and whatever, why would we not just serve them more politics content? And we actually went on the other end of the spectrum, which is Neil and our editors have a finger on the pulse of like what our audience wants. And like it's up to the editor to determine what they think would resonate most or what's the most valuable in any given day. And so the whole curation versus hyper personalization, I think is always like a really interesting debate for
Yeah.
publishers.
I'm like laughing because I think like Austin caught a stray here with the in theory. I mean, that's like fairly
No,
in
no,
theory. In theory, he's analytical.
no, no. He is very analytical.
Okay. Well, we're about out of time, but I just want to like when we wrap up, can just give me like sort of for those who are thinking in the 78% of the people responding about like upping their sort of email strategy, just give me one or two pieces of advice. Matt, I'm going to start with you.
Figure out what you want before you do anything. Just, do you need ad dollars? Do you need traffic? Do you need event signups? Do you need engagement? Like, let that first decision about what you actually want from your business, from your publication, from your endeavor. Once you figure that out, then all the other pieces are going to fall into place.
Okay, Tyler.
I think I'd start with like what your value prop is and like why your audience comes to you for the content that you create. And I come from like a different, like we know that TechCrunch's content is great. So like it's a different problem of you optimizing for audience growth or revenue, because I deal with a lot of the like, independent journalists, digital entrepreneurs. They are, as you mentioned at that conference, hyper optimizing around growth tactics and like how to scale their audience and squeeze every dollar out of an open or a click, where a lot of them overlook like what is the content where I have a competitive advantage that people would even sign up to this newsletter or be a part of this publication in the first place. So I think it's like the yin and yang, right?
Yeah.
You kind of need to have both. And I think most operators or publishers skew on one end of the spectrum, and trying to take the best practices of each, I think, is like how you have to
Yeah.
succeed.
My one thing would be, don't just look at dashboards, like talk to the people who are in your audience. They will tell you. And what you hear from people when they respond to you is way more important oftentimes than what you see in a dashboard. Because a lot of times the data will lead you into all sorts of areas, but nothing really replaces talking specifically to the audience and really understanding what they need from you and what they want from you.
I'd also double that and say that a lot of people think because you're kind of like sending this email into the void that it feels more one way when it really should be two way. And so when people would ask me, how do I grow faster? I have this like recommendation network and this referral program. I always recommend just like asking them at the top of the newsletter, if you've enjoyed this newsletter, to share it with one other person. And that's always the most shares that they've ever received. And it's so simple.
We have a thing like that at the top of Cheddar's Need to Know newsletter, which is on Beehive, that says, if you like this email, please share it with a friend. If you didn't like it, why not share with an enemy?
Yeah, there you go. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And thank you to our friends at Morning Brew.
Thank you, Morning Brew, for hosting us.
Thank you.
Bye.